The sharp crack of a pistol being cocked pierced the stifling silence of the sheriff's office as Catherine Wells stared down at the yellowed paper before her, her trembling fingers clutching the pen so tightly her knuckles had turned white. The year was 1876, and in the small town of Ely, Nevada, Catherine's world was crumbling beneath her feet. "Sign it, Miss Wells," Sheriff Dawson demanded, his voice cold as the metal barrel of the gun he had pointed at her temple. "Mr. Harrison has been mighty patient with you, but his patience has run dry. The bank needs that land, and they need it now." Catherine's eyes blurred with tears as she glanced around the room. Mr. Harrison, the bank owner, sat smugly behind the sheriff's desk, his hands folded across his expensive vest. Two of his hired men stood by the door, ensuring no one would interrupt this legal transaction. "This isn't legal," she protested, her voice barely above a whisper. "My father's will clearly stated. Your father's will means nothing," Harrison interrupted. "He owed the bank money, Miss Wells. A substantial amount. Now that he's 6 feet under, that debt falls to you. Either sign over the land or we'll have you thrown in jail for theft." Catherine knew it was a lie. Her father had been meticulous with his finances, never borrowing more than he could repay. The Twin Creek Ranch had been in the Wells family for 2 generations, and she'd sooner die than give it up to these vultures. "I won't sign," she said, dropping the pen. Sheriff Dawson grabbed her wrist, forcing the pen back into her hand. "You don't have a choice, girl." The wooden door of the sheriff's office suddenly flew open with such force it slammed against the wall. Framed in the doorway stood a tall figure, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. Dust from the street billowed around him, creating an almost ethereal aura in the late afternoon sunlight. "I believe the lady said she won't sign," the stranger declared, his deep voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Harrison stood abruptly. "This is a private matter, mister. I suggest you leave." Before, in one fluid motion, the stranger had drawn his revolver, aiming it steadily at the banker. Before what? The 2 guards reached for their weapons, but the stranger was faster. "I wouldn't," he warned. "I can put both of you down before you clear leather." Sheriff Dawson released Catherine's wrist, turning his own weapon toward the newcomer. "You're interfering with official business, stranger. Is it official business to force a woman to sign away her property at gunpoint?" The man stepped fully into the room, and Catherine caught her first clear glimpse of his face. Strong jawline, piercing blue eyes, and a small scar that cut across his left cheek. He couldn't have been more than 30 years old. The stranger moved toward Catherine, never lowering his weapon. When he reached her, he placed his free hand over hers, stopping her from signing the document. His touch was surprisingly gentle, a stark contrast to his intimidating presence. "Isaiah Jones," he introduced himself to her quietly before addressing the room. "And I know a land grab when I see one." Catherine felt a surge of hope as she looked up at him. "They're trying to steal my ranch," she explained. "My father just died 3 weeks ago, and they're claiming he owed money to the bank." Isaiah's eyes narrowed as he examined the document on the desk. "This doesn't look legal to me." "Where's the court order?" Harrison sputtered. "We don't need a court order. The debt should be properly documented and presented to a judge," Isaiah finished. "Sheriff, I'm surprised you're participating in this." Sheriff Dawson's face reddened. "Harrison pays my salary, not the town." "A man's got to eat." Isaiah nodded slowly. "So that's how it is." He turned to Catherine. "Miss Wells, Catherine Wells," she supplied. "Miss Wells, I suggest we take this matter to Judge Wilson in Carson City. I happen to know he takes a dim view of forced property transfers." Harrison slammed his fist on the desk. "You have no right to interfere. Do you know who I am?" "A man who's about to back down," Isaiah replied calmly. unless you want this whole town to know how you conduct business." The standoff lasted several tense moments before Harrison finally nodded to the sheriff. Dawson lowered his weapon reluctantly. "This isn't over," Harrison warned as he gathered the unsigned papers. "Not by a long shot." "It is for today," Isaiah responded, his hand still protectively covering Catherine's. "Miss Wells is leaving with me, and this document stays unsigned." Catherine felt her heart racing as Isaiah gently helped her to her feet. She had no idea who this man was or why he had come to her aid, but in that moment, she trusted him more than anyone else in Ely. They left the sheriff's office together, Isaiah keeping himself between Catherine and the men until they were outside on the dusty Main Street. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows as they walked away. "Thank you," Catherine said once they were out of earshot, "but I don't understand, why would you help me?" Isaiah adjusted his hat, looking down at her with those intense blue eyes. "Let's just say I have personal experience with men like Harrison. They've been squeezing small ranchers all across Nevada." He glanced back at the sheriff's office. "Do you have somewhere safe to go? They'll try again." Catherine nodded. "My ranch, Twin Creek, about 5 miles outside of town." "Do you have workers there? Someone who can keep watch?" Her face fell. "Just our foreman, Mr. Daniels. Most of our hands left after Father died. I couldn't pay them." Isaiah considered this information. "Then I'll escort you home. It's not safe for you to be alone right now." "You don't have to do that," Catherine protested, though relief flooded through her at his offer. "I know I don't," he replied with a small smile that softened his rugged features, "but I'm going to anyway." Catherine led him to the small stable where she'd left her horse, a chestnut mare named Penny. Isaiah's own mount, a powerful black gelding, was tied outside the saloon across the street. As they rode out of town, Catherine couldn't help stealing glances at her mysterious savior. His clothes were trail-worn but well-kept dark pants, a faded blue shirt, and a leather vest. 2 revolvers hung at his hips, and she could see the stock of a rifle protruding from his saddle holster. "You're not just passing through, are you, Mr. Jones?" she asked as they rode side by side along the dusty trail leading away from town. "Isaiah," he corrected. "And no, not exactly." He was quiet for a moment before adding, "I've been tracking Harrison's operations for a while now. Your situation isn't unique, unfortunately. He's been doing this all across Nevada and parts of Utah." "Why would you care about that?" Catherine asked, curiosity overcoming her usual reserve. The hardness returned to his eyes. 2 years ago, he did the same thing to my brother in a town called Piotch. By the time I arrived, my brother had taken his own life rather than lose everything." He paused, his jaw tightening. "I've been gathering evidence against Harrison ever since." Catherine's heart ached for him. "I'm sorry about your brother." Isaiah nodded but said nothing more. They rode in silence for several miles, the landscape gradually changing from the flat, dusty plains surrounding Ely to the more verdant foothills that housed the Twin Creek Ranch. As they crested a small rise, Catherine's ranch came into view. The main house was a substantial 2-story structure built of sturdy logs and stone, with a wide front porch. A large barn stood nearby, along with several smaller outbuildings. 2 creeks converged on the property, giving the ranch its name and ensuring the pastures remained green even in the dry months. "It's beautiful," Isaiah remarked. "It was my mother's dream," Catherine explained, emotion tightening her throat. "She died when I was 12, but she always wanted a place where the creeks met. My father built this house for her." They approached the main house, and an older man emerged from the barn, rifle in hand. He relaxed when he recognized Catherine. "Miss Kathy." "Thank the Lord you're back safe," he called out, approaching them. "When you didn't return by noon, I was getting worried." His eyes narrowed as they fixed on Isaiah. "Who's your friend, Mr. Daniels?" "This is Isaiah Jones," Catherine introduced them as they dismounted. "He helped me in town." "Mr. Jones, this is Edward Daniels, our foreman and my father's oldest friend." The men shook hands, Daniels eyeing Isaiah warily. "Helped you how, exactly?" Catherine glanced at Isaiah before explaining. "Harrison and Sheriff Dawson tried to force me to sign over the ranch. They claimed father owed money to the bank." Daniels spat on the ground. "That's horse manure. Your pa never borrowed a cent he couldn't pay back." "I know," Catherine agreed. "Mr. Jones stopped them before I could sign anything, but Harrison won't give up easily." "They'll likely send men tonight," Isaiah added. "Is there anyone else here besides you two?" Daniels shook his head. "Just us since last week when the remaining hands left. Can't blame them, no pay coming." Isaiah looked at the sprawling property, mentally calculating. "We need to prepare. They'll come after dark, probably try to scare you first, maybe set fire to an outbuilding or shoot up the place." "How can you be so sure?" Catherine asked, though she feared he was right. "Because I've seen their tactics before," he replied grimly. "They want the land, but would prefer not to have murder charges. They'll try to terrify you into leaving or signing." As the sun began to set, they made preparations. Daniels checked and loaded every weapon on the property. Isaiah scouted the approaches to the house, identifying the most likely routes attackers would use. Catherine prepared food, knowing they might be in for a long night. "Why is Harrison so determined to get this land?" Isaiah asked as they sat down to a simple meal of beef stew and bread. Catherine hesitated before answering. "There are rumors of silver in these hills, nothing confirmed, but enough to make a greedy man take notice," Isaiah finished for her. "Especially with the Comstock lode playing out. Everyone's looking for the next big strike." "My father never cared about silver," Catherine said. "This was cattle land to him, a place to raise a family." Isaiah studied her across the table. In the lamplight he could see the fatigue and worry etched on her face, but also a remarkable strength. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a simple braid, and her green eyes, though tired, remained alert and intelligent. "How long have you been running the ranch alone?" he asked. "Since father fell ill last winter," she replied. "He lingered for months before passing. I've been managing everything: the cattle, the accounts, the hands." She smiled ruefully. "Not very successfully, it seems." "Don't be too hard on yourself," Daniels interjected. "Your pa would be proud of how you've handled things, Miss Cathy. Not many women could have done what you've done." A loud crack suddenly split the night air, followed by the unmistakable whine of a bullet passing through the window. All three ducked instinctively. "It's starting," Isaiah said, extinguishing the lamp. "Daniels, take the back of the house. Catherine, stay low and away from the windows." Another shot rang out, then several more in quick succession. Through the darkness, Catherine could see flames erupting from one of the smaller outbuildings. "They're burning the smokehouse," she gasped. Isaiah moved to the window, peering carefully through the curtains. "I count at least 6 riders. They're spreading out around the property." Catherine grabbed a rifle from the rack by the door. "This is my home. I'm going to defend it." Isaiah looked like he wanted to argue but nodded instead. "Stay behind something solid. Don't give them a clean shot." For the next hour, gunfire echoed across the ranch. Isaiah and Daniels returned fire strategically, aiming to keep the attackers at bay rather than hit them. Catherine positioned herself at an upstairs window, watching for anyone attempting to reach the house. During a brief lull in the shooting, Isaiah joined her upstairs. "They're pulling back," he reported, "but they'll be back with more men." "What can we do?" Catherine asked, fear and determination warring within her. Isaiah considered for a moment. We need to get you to Carson City to see Judge Wilson. He can issue an order protecting your property while we sort this out legally. But that's 2 days' ride, Catherine protested, and I can't leave Mr. Daniels here alone. I can handle myself, Miss Cathy, the foreman called from below. Been doing it for 60-some years now. Isaiah placed a hand on Catherine's shoulder. If we leave tonight, we can be halfway to Carson City by dawn. Harrison won't expect us to leave. Catherine looked around at the home her parents had built, at the land that had been in her family for generations. I won't run away, she said firmly. This is my home and I'll fight for it. Isaiah studied her face in the darkness, admiration mixing with frustration. Fighting doesn't always mean standing your ground. Sometimes it means being smart enough to retreat and come back stronger. Before she could respond, the sound of approaching horses reached them. Many horses. That's more than 6 riders, Daniels said grimly, joining them upstairs. Isaiah moved to the window, peering out at the moonlit landscape. At least 15, he confirmed, and they've brought torches. Catherine's heart sank. They couldn't fight off that many men, and if they set fire to the main house, everything would be lost. We need to go, Isaiah said urgently. Now, while they're still organizing, there's a back trail through the hills, isn't there? One that doesn't lead back to Ely, Catherine nodded. It follows the eastern creek up into the mountains. We use it to move cattle to the high pastures in summer. Good. Pack only what you absolutely need. We leave in 5 minutes. Catherine moved quickly, grabbing a small bag and filling it with essentials: a change of clothes, her mother's locket, and the deed to the ranch. She added what little money she had saved and her father's pocket watch. Downstairs, she found Isaiah and Daniels in intense conversation. You can't stay here alone, Isaiah was insisting. Daniels shook his head stubbornly. Someone has to stay and make them think the place is defended. I'll slip away after you're clear. He turned to Catherine. Don't you worry about me, Miss Cathy. This old dog still has a few tricks. Catherine embraced the man who had been like a second father to her. Be careful, Mr. Daniels, please. You too, child, he replied gruffly. Now go, make your pa proud. They slipped out the back door while Daniels fired several shots from the front of the house to draw attention. Isaiah led Catherine to the horses, which they had moved to a small copse of trees behind the barn earlier as a precaution. As they mounted, Catherine cast one last look at her home, illuminated by the burning smokehouse and the approaching torches of Harrison's men. Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them away. This wasn't goodbye, she told herself. She would return. They rode hard through the darkness, following the eastern creek as it wound its way up into the foothills. The sounds of gunfire faded behind them, though Catherine flinched each time she heard a shot, worrying for Daniels. Isaiah set a grueling pace, pushing their horses as fast as was safe on the unfamiliar trail in the darkness. Only when they reached a high ridge, several miles from the ranch, did he allow them to stop and rest. From their vantage point, they could see the Twin Creek Ranch in the distance. Catherine's heart clenched as she saw flames now engulfing the barn. I'm sorry, Isaiah said softly, following her gaze. Catherine squared her shoulders. Buildings can be rebuilt. Land endures. They continued through the night, the trail gradually becoming steeper and more challenging as they ascended into the mountains. By dawn, they had put considerable distance between themselves and their pursuers, but Isaiah remained vigilant, frequently checking their back trail for signs of pursuit. As the sun rose, they stopped in a small protected canyon with a clear spring. The horses needed rest, and Catherine was nearly falling from her saddle with exhaustion. We should be safe here for a few hours, Isaiah said, helping her dismount. Her legs buckled as she touched the ground, and he caught her before she could fall. "You need sleep." Catherine wanted to argue but couldn't find the energy. Isaiah spread a blanket in the shade of a large boulder, and she sank down gratefully. He tended to the horses while she tried to stay awake, but exhaustion soon claimed her. When she woke, the sun was high in the sky. Isaiah sat nearby, cleaning his revolver with practiced efficiency. "How long was I asleep?" she asked, sitting up. "About 4 hours," he replied. "You needed it." Catherine pushed her hair back from her face, suddenly aware of how disheveled she must look. "Thank you for everything you've done. You didn't have to get involved in my problems." Isaiah reassembled his weapon with quick, precise movements. "Like I said, Harrison has been my problem for 2 years now." He holstered the revolver and looked at her. "But even if that weren't the case, I couldn't have walked away, not when I saw you in that office being threatened and coerced." "Why not?" Catherine asked, genuinely curious about this man who had risked his life for a stranger. He seemed to consider his answer carefully. "My father taught me that a man is defined by the stands he takes. Walking away from injustice makes you complicit in it." Catherine studied him, seeing beyond the tough exterior to the principled man beneath. "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was," Isaiah agreed, a hint of sadness in his voice. "He died during the war, fighting for the Union." "My father too," Catherine said. "Though he survived the fighting only to come home with a bullet lodged near his spine. It pained him for years before finally taking him from me." This shared understanding passed between them, creating a connection neither had anticipated. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Isaiah rose to his feet. "We should get moving," he said. "We have a long journey ahead of us." They traveled through the rest of the day, following game trails and old Native American paths through the mountains. Isaiah proved to be an expert tracker and navigator, always finding the easiest route for the horses while maintaining their direction toward Carson City. As dusk approached, they made camp in a small clearing beside a stream. Isaiah built a small, nearly smokeless fire while Catherine prepared a simple meal from the provisions they had brought. "You think Mr. Daniels got away?" Catherine asked as they ate. "He seemed capable," Isaiah replied. "And he knows the land better than Harrison's men. I'd wager he's holed up somewhere safe, waiting for this to blow over." Catherine nodded, wanting to believe it. "What will happen when we reach Carson City?" "Judge Wilson is a fair man. Once we present the true facts of the situation and show him the legitimate deed to your property, he should issue an injunction against Harrison's actions." Isaiah added more wood to the fire. "But that's just the beginning. To truly stop Harrison, we need to expose his entire operation." "How do we do that?" "I've been gathering evidence for 2 years' testimonies from other victims, bank records showing fraudulent loans, bribes to local officials." Isaiah's eyes reflected the firelight as he spoke. "Your case could be the one that finally brings him down." Catherine felt a flicker of hope. "Do you really think so?" "I do," he said with conviction. "But it won't be easy and it won't be quick. Harrison has money and influence. This fight could take months." "I'm not afraid of a fight," Catherine said, her chin lifting. "Especially for something worth fighting for." Isaiah smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. "I'm starting to see that about you, Miss Wells." As night fully descended, they took turns keeping watch. During Catherine's shift, she found herself studying Isaiah as he slept. In repose, the hard lines of his face softened, making him appear younger, more vulnerable. She wondered about his life before his brother's death, before vengeance became his purpose. They continued their journey at first light, pushing deeper into the mountains. The terrain grew more challenging, but it provided better cover from any potential pursuers. By midday, They had begun the descent toward the western side of the range, which would eventually lead them to Carson City. As they navigated a particularly steep section of trail, Catherine's horse suddenly spooked, nearly sending her tumbling down the rocky slope. Isaiah reacted instantly, grabbing Penny's reins and steadying the frightened animal. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. Catherine nodded, her heart racing. "Just startled, thank you." Isaiah dismounted to check the horse's legs, ensuring she hadn't injured herself. "Something spooked her," he muttered, scanning their surroundings warily. The answer came moments later as a mountain lion emerged from behind a large boulder further up the trail. The big cat eyed them cautiously, tail twitching. "Stay still," Isaiah whispered, slowly reaching for his rifle. The mountain lion crouched, muscles tensing as it prepared to spring. Isaiah raised his rifle, but before he could fire, Catherine touched his arm. "Wait," she said softly. "It's just protecting its territory." She began to back her horse away slowly, maintaining eye contact with the predator. Isaiah followed her lead, keeping his rifle ready but not firing. After several tense moments, the mountain lion seemed to decide they weren't worth the effort and disappeared back into the rocks. "That was close," Isaiah said, letting out a breath. "My father always said animals only attack when they're scared or hungry," Catherine explained. "It didn't look hungry, just territorial." Isaiah gave her an appraising look. "You continue to surprise me, Miss Wells. Most people would have wanted me to shoot." "I've seen enough violence lately," she replied simply. They found an alternate route down the mountain, adding time to their journey but avoiding the mountain lion's territory. As they rode, Isaiah shared more about his past, telling Catherine about growing up in Ohio, fighting in the latter years of the Civil War despite his youth, and eventually heading west with his brother to seek their fortunes. In turn, Catherine told him about her mother's gentle wisdom, her father's determination to build something lasting, and her own dreams for the Twin Creek Ranch. She described how she had learned to manage cattle, keep the books, and negotiate with buyers, all skills her father had insisted she master, unusual though it was for a woman. "He sounds like he was ahead of his time," Isaiah remarked. "He believed women were as capable as men, just differently," Catherine explained. "He said my mother taught him that." As the sun began to set on their second day of travel, they spotted a small town in the distance, nestled in a valley between the mountains they were descending and the ones that lay ahead. "Eureka!" Isaiah identified it. "We can rest there tonight, get proper meals and supplies before continuing to Carson City tomorrow." Catherine hesitated. "Is it safe? What if Harrison has men there too?" "It's possible," Isaiah admitted. "But Harrison's main operations are in Ely and Carson City. A small mining town like Eureka is probably not worth his attention." He studied her tired face. "Besides, we both need real rest before facing what's ahead in Carson City." They approached the town cautiously as twilight deepened into night. Eureka was primarily a silver mining town, with a main street lined with the usual establishments: a general store, a hotel, 2 saloons, and assorted businesses catering to miners and travelers. They stabled their horses at the livery and made their way to the hotel, a modest 2-story building with a small restaurant attached. Isaiah insisted on getting separate rooms but made sure they were adjacent to each other. "I'll be right next door if you need anything," he told her as they parted in the hallway. "Try to get some rest. Tomorrow will be another long day." Catherine nodded, suddenly aware of how filthy and exhausted she was. The hotel room was simple but clean, with a real bed, a washstand with a pitcher of water, and a small window overlooking the main street. The luxury of washing away 2 days of trail dust and sleeping in a proper bed nearly brought tears to her eyes. After cleaning up and changing into her spare clothes, Catherine realized how hungry she was. The hotel restaurant was still serving dinner, so she made her way downstairs, finding Isaiah already seated at a corner table with a clear view of both the entrance and the stairs. He stood as she approached, pulling out a chair for her. "You look refreshed," he commented as she sat down. "Amazing what soap and water can accomplish," she replied with a small smile. "Though I fear my clothes have seen better days. We can get you some supplies in the morning," he offered. "There's a general store across the street." They ordered hearty meals, beef stew for Catherine and a thick steak for Isaiah, and ate in companionable silence for a while, both too hungry for conversation. As they finished, Catherine noticed Isaiah's attention repeatedly drawn to a table near the bar where 3 men sat drinking and playing cards. "Something wrong?" she asked quietly. Isaiah shook his head slightly. "Just being cautious. Those men came in shortly after us and have been watching rather than playing their game." Catherine resisted the urge to turn and look. Harrison's men, maybe, or just curious about newcomers. He placed some coins on the table. "Either way, we should turn in. Morning comes early." They climbed the stairs together, Isaiah positioning himself between Catherine and the main room. At her door, she paused. "Thank you again," she said softly, "for everything." "Get some sleep, Catherine," he replied, using her first name for the first time. The sound of it in his deep voice sent an unexpected shiver through her. "Lock your door and don't open it for anyone but me." She nodded and slipped into her room, turning the key in the lock as instructed. Despite her exhaustion, sleep didn't come easily. Her mind kept replaying the events of the past few days, the confrontation in the sheriff's office, the attack on her ranch, the escape through the mountains. And through it all, Isaiah's steady presence, his unwavering support of a woman he barely knew. What kind of man risked so much for a stranger's fight? The obvious answer that he was fighting his own battle against Harrison didn't fully explain the care he had shown her, the risks he had taken specifically to protect her. She was still pondering this when a soft knock came at her door. Immediately alert, she reached for the small revolver Isaiah had insisted she keep with her. "Catherine," Isaiah's voice came through the door, pitched low. "It's me." She unlocked the door quickly, finding him fully dressed and alert despite the late hour. "What's wrong?" "Those men from downstairs are asking questions about us at the front desk," he explained, stepping into her room and closing the door behind him. "Could be nothing, but I don't want to take chances." Catherine moved to gather her few belongings. "Should we leave now?" Isaiah nodded. "There's a back staircase at the end of the hall. We can use it to reach the stables without being seen." They slipped out of the room and down the dimly lit hallway. The back stairs were narrow and steep, obviously meant for the hotel staff rather than guests. They descended cautiously, emerging into a small alley behind the hotel. The night air was cool, stars brilliant in the clear mountain sky. They made their way quietly through the shadows, avoiding the pools of light cast by the few lanterns illuminating Eureka's Main Street. As they neared the livery stable, a figure stepped out from between 2 buildings, blocking their path. Isaiah pushed Catherine behind him instinctively as his hand dropped to his revolver. "Leaving so soon?" the man asked, his voice thick with alcohol but his stance steadier than his speech suggested. "Mr. Harrison sends his regards." 2 more men appeared behind them, closing off their retreat. Catherine recognized them as the card players from the restaurant. "We don't want trouble," Isaiah said evenly. "Just passing through," the first man laughed. "Funny thing is, trouble seems to want you, Jones. Harrison's put quite a price on your head and the ladies." How did he find us so quickly? Catherine whispered. Telegraph, Isaiah muttered back. He must have sent descriptions to every town within 2 days' ride of Ely. The man took a step closer. Now, you two are coming with us. Harrison wants to have a little chat back in Ely. Isaiah's hand hovered near his revolver. I count 3 of you and 2 of us. Not great odds for you. The man's eyes narrowed. Big talk from a dead man walking. What happened next unfolded so quickly Catherine could barely follow it. Isaiah drew and fired in one fluid motion, hitting the first man in the shoulder. As the man fell backward with a cry of pain, Isaiah spun and pushed Catherine toward the entrance of the livery stable. Get the horses, he shouted, turning to face the other 2 men who were now drawing their own weapons. Catherine ran into the stable, frantically searching for their mounts in the darkened building. Behind her, gunshots echoed in the alley, followed by shouts and the sound of running feet. Her hands trembled as she quickly saddled Penny and Isaiah's black gelding, leading them both toward the stable doors. More gunfire erupted from the street out front as Catherine reached the doors. She hesitated, unsure which way to go or where Isaiah was. Suddenly he appeared at the side entrance, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. Isaiah, she gasped. I'm fine, he insisted, taking the reins of his horse. But we need to go. Now. More of Harrison's men are coming. They mounted quickly and rode out the back of the stable, away from the main street. Behind them, shouts and more gunfire indicated that Harrison's men were in pursuit. Isaiah led them out of town at a gallop, heading southwest across open country rather than following the main road. Where are we going? Catherine called as they rode. Changing our plans, he shouted back. We can't risk the main routes to Carson City now. We'll have to take the long way around. They rode hard for several miles before Isaiah finally slowed their pace to preserve the horses. The moon provided enough light to navigate, but they had to be careful of the uneven terrain. Are you really all right? Catherine asked, noticing how he held himself stiffly in the saddle. Caught the edge of a bullet, he admitted, touching his side where his shirt was darkened with blood. Just a graze. We need to stop and tend to it, she insisted. Not yet. They'll be following our trail as soon as it's light. We need more distance. They continued through the night, the terrain gradually changing from open rangeland to more wooded foothills. Only when the eastern sky began to lighten with the approaching dawn did Isaiah finally agree to stop, finding a secluded spot near a small stream. Let me see that wound, Catherine said as they dismounted. Isaiah reluctantly removed his vest and lifted his shirt, revealing a bloody furrow across his ribs. Catherine winced at the sight but set about cleaning it with water from the stream. You've done this before, Isaiah observed as she worked. The war left many wounded men, she replied. My father included. I learned to tend injuries out of necessity. She tore a strip from her petticoat to make a bandage, wrapping it firmly around his torso. Her fingers brushed against his skin, warm despite the cool morning air. She became acutely aware of their proximity, of the intimacy of tending to his wound. When she glanced up, she found his blue eyes watching her intently. Thank you, he said softly. Catherine nodded, suddenly unable to find words. She finished securing the bandage and moved away, busying herself with caring for the horses. What's our plan now? She asked when she had composed herself. If we can't take the main route to Carson City. Isaiah spread a map on the ground between them, tracing a route with his finger. We're here, roughly. If we continue southwest, we can cross the mountains here, then follow this valley until we reach the Carson River. It's longer and rougher country, but Harrison's men are less likely to find us. How much longer will it take? 3 days, maybe 4, he admitted. but it's safer than risking the main roads where Harrison has men watching. Catherine studied the map, noting the challenging terrain they would have to traverse. Then that's what we'll do. They rested for a few hours before continuing their journey. The new route took them through increasingly rugged country-steep mountainsides covered in pine and aspen, rushing streams they had to ford carefully, and narrow passes where they had to dismount and lead the horses. During the days that followed, they settled into a rhythm, traveling from dawn until dusk, making camp in sheltered locations, and taking turns keeping watch. They shared the work without discussion, Isaiah hunting small game for their meals while Catherine prepared it, both caring for the horses, both staying vigilant for any sign of pursuit. In the quiet evenings around their small campfires, they continued to share stories of their lives. Catherine told Isaiah about her dreams for Twin Creek Ranch, the improvements she wanted to make, the bloodlines she hoped to develop in their cattle herd, the orchards she had started planting before her father's illness had consumed all their resources. Isaiah spoke of his time as a lawman in Kansas before coming west with his brother, of the small ranch they had purchased in Piotch, and of his grief and rage when his brother had been driven to suicide by Harrison's schemes. "What will you do once Harrison is brought to justice?" Catherine asked on their third night following the new route. Isaiah stared into the fire, considering her question. "I haven't thought that far ahead," he admitted. "For 2 years, stopping Harrison has been my only purpose." "Surely you must have other dreams," she pressed gently. He looked up at her then, his expression softening in the firelight. "I used to. A ranch of my own, perhaps. A family someday." He added another stick to the fire. "What about you? Beyond saving Twin Creek, what do you dream of?" Catherine hugged her knees to her chest. "I want to make Twin Creek thrive, to fulfill my parents' vision for it. But beyond that—" She hesitated, suddenly shy. "I suppose I've always hoped for a partner to share it with, someone who sees me as an equal, not just as a woman to be protected or a property to be acquired." Their eyes met across the fire, and something unspoken passed between them. In that moment, Catherine realized her feelings for Isaiah had grown beyond gratitude or even friendship. The realization both thrilled and frightened her. Isaiah seemed about to speak when a distant sound caught his attention. He raised a hand for silence, listening intently. Catherine heard it too, the faint but unmistakable sound of horses approaching. "Douse the fire," Isaiah whispered, already moving to gather their essential belongings. Catherine kicked dirt over the small flames while Isaiah saddled the horses with remarkable speed. Within minutes, they were mounted and moving deeper into the forest, away from their campsite and the approaching riders. They traveled in darkness, Isaiah leading them through the trees with an uncanny sense of direction. Only when they had put several miles between themselves and the search party did they pause to rest the horses. "How did they find us?" Catherine asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "They might not have," Isaiah replied. "Could be a hunting party or travelers, but we can't take chances." They continued through the night, making slow but steady progress through the difficult terrain. By dawn, they had reached a high ridge that offered a view of the valley below and the mountains beyond. "There," Isaiah said, pointing to a silver ribbon in the distance. "The Carson River. 1 more day of travel and we'll reach it. Then it's just a matter of following it to Carson City." Catherine nodded, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. They had barely slept in days, and the constant tension of possible pursuit was taking its toll. Isaiah noticed her fatigue and insisted they rest during the heat of the day, finding a sheltered overhang that hid them from view while providing shade. "Sleep," he urged her. "I'll keep watch." Too tired to argue, Catherine wrapped herself in a blanket and was asleep almost instantly. When she woke, the sun was low in the western sky, casting long shadows across the landscape. Isaiah sat nearby, his back against a tree, revolver ready in his hand. "Any sign of pursuit?" she asked, sitting up. He shook his head. "Nothing. I'm beginning to think we might have lost them." They ate a simple meal of jerky and dried fruit before continuing their journey, descending toward the valley as twilight deepened into night. The going was easier now, the slope more gradual and the trees less dense. As they rode, Catherine found herself studying Isaiah's profile in the moonlight. The past days had changed something between them. The shared dangers, the long conversations by firelight, the quiet moments of vulnerability, all had combined to create a bond she hadn't anticipated when she first met him in the sheriff's office. "Isaiah," she said softly, breaking the companionable silence that had fallen between them. "What happens after Carson City? After we see Judge Wilson?" He glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. "That depends on how things unfold. Best case, the judge issues an injunction protecting your property and opens an investigation into Harrison. Worst case, we have to find another way to bring Harrison down." "That's not what I meant," Catherine said, gathering her courage. "I meant, what happens with us?" Isaiah reined his horse to a stop, turning to face her fully. "Catherine," the crack of a rifle shot cut through the night air. Isaiah's horse reared in panic, nearly unseating him. More shots followed in rapid succession as riders emerged from the trees ahead of them. "Ambush!" Isaiah shouted, drawing his revolver as he fought to control his frightened mount. "Ride, Catherine. Back up the slope." Catherine hesitated, unwilling to leave him. "Not without you. Go," he insisted, firing at the approaching riders. "I'll find you." With a cry of frustration, Catherine wheeled Penny around and galloped back the way they had come. Behind her, gunfire continued to echo through the valley. She rode hard, tears streaming down her face, her heart torn between self-preservation and the desperate need to help Isaiah. When she reached the ridge they had descended earlier, she reined Penny to a stop, turning to look back. In the moonlight, she could make out the shadowy forms of riders moving in the valley below, but couldn't distinguish Isaiah among them. Torn with indecision, she finally dismounted and led Penny into a dense thicket of trees, tethering her securely before making her way back to the edge of the ridge on foot. From this vantage point, she could see the aftermath of the ambush. Several figures lay motionless on the ground. Others were mounting up, apparently preparing to continue their search. Catherine's heart constricted with fear for Isaiah. Was he among those still figures on the valley floor, or had he managed to escape his attackers? She watched as the mounted men split into two groups, one heading further down the valley, the other beginning to ascend toward her position. She retreated quickly to where she had left Penny, untying the mare and leading her deeper into the forest, away from the approaching riders. For hours, Catherine moved cautiously through the darkness, stopping frequently to listen for pursuers. Eventually, she found a small cave formed by a rockfall, just large enough to conceal herself and Penny from casual observation. As dawn broke, Catherine faced the grim reality of her situation. She was alone in unfamiliar territory, possibly being hunted by Harrison's men, with no certainty about Isaiah's fate. Her supplies were limited, just what had been in her saddlebags when they fled the ambush. The map was with Isaiah. She had two choices: try to find her way back to Twin Creek Ranch or continue to Carson City as planned. After careful consideration, she decided on the latter. If Isaiah had survived, that's where he would expect to find her, and if he hadn't, well, she still needed to see Judge Wilson about Harrison's illegal activities. Using the sun as her guide, Catherine headed southwest, keeping the distant mountains on her right as Isaiah had taught her during their journey. The going was slow, as she had to remain vigilant for any sign of Harrison's men while navigating unfamiliar terrain. By midday, she had reached the valley floor and could see the Carson River glittering in the distance. She approached cautiously, staying within the tree line rather than venturing into the open. As she neared the river, she heard voices ahead. Dismounting quickly, she led Penny behind a large boulder and listened. Two men were talking nearby, their conversation clearly audible. "Waste of time," one was saying. "Jones is either dead or long gone by now." "Harrison wants the woman found," the second replied. "Said she's the key to getting that ranch legally. Without her signature, he's got nothing." "Well, she ain't here. We've been watching this crossing all day." "Let's move downstream and try there." Catherine held her breath as the men mounted up and rode away. Once she was certain they were gone, she led Penny to the river, following it from a safe distance within the trees. Progress was slow, but she consoled herself with the knowledge that she was heading in the right direction. As dusk approached, exhaustion began to overtake her. She had barely slept in days, and the emotional toll of the ambush and Isaiah's unknown fate weighed heavily on her. Finding a secluded spot near a small tributary, she made camp, allowing herself a small, smokeless fire to ward off the night's chill. As she sat beside the tiny flames, memories of Isaiah filled her mind, his steady presence, his quiet strength, the way his rare smiles transformed his face. The thought that she might never see him again brought fresh tears to her eyes. "Don't give up on me yet," a familiar voice spoke from the darkness. Catherine jumped to her feet, scarcely believing her ears. From the shadows emerged Isaiah, leading his black gelding. He was disheveled, with a fresh cut across one cheek and his left arm held stiffly at his side, but he was gloriously, wonderfully alive. "Isaiah!" she cried, running to him without thought. He caught her with his good arm, holding her tightly against him. For a long moment, they simply clung to each other, the relief of reunion overwhelming any sense of propriety. When Catherine finally pulled back to look at him, she couldn't stop her hands from touching his face, reassuring herself that he was real. "I thought you might be dead," she whispered. "It was close," he admitted. "Took a bullet in the arm but managed to lose them in the darkness." "How did you find me?" A small smile touched his lips. "I know you, Catherine Wells. I knew you'd continue toward Carson City, and I knew you'd be smart enough to stay hidden and follow the river." She helped him sit by the fire, then insisted on examining his wounded arm. The bullet had passed through the muscle of his upper arm, missing the bone but leaving a painful injury that needed proper care. "We need to get you to a doctor," she said as she cleaned and rebandaged the wound. "Carson City isn't far now," he replied. "We can reach it by tomorrow evening if we're careful. Harrison's men are watching the main crossings of the river, but I found a place upstream where we can ford safely." They set out at first light, Isaiah leading them to a shallow stretch of the river several miles upstream. They crossed without incident and continued their journey, staying away from the roads and traveling through less populated areas. By late afternoon, they began to see signs of civilization, distant farms and ranches on the outskirts of Carson City. Isaiah led them to a small homestead set back from the main road, explaining that the owner was a former lawman he had once worked with. The man, Matthew Turner, welcomed them warmly despite their bedraggled appearance. After hearing their story, he offered them shelter for the night and promised to arrange a meeting with Judge Wilson the following morning. "Harrison's influence doesn't extend as far in Carson City as it does in Ely," Turner explained as they sat around his kitchen table. "Judge Wilson is known for his integrity, If anyone can help you, he can." For the first time in days, Catherine allowed herself to truly relax. They were safe, at least for the moment, and tomorrow they would finally have the chance to present their case to someone who could help. As evening fell, Catherine found herself alone with Isaiah on Turner's front porch. The setting sun bathed the landscape in golden light, highlighting the distant mountains they had traversed together. "We made it," she said softly. Isaiah nodded, his expression thoughtful. "The journey's not over yet. Harrison won't give up easily, even with a judge's order." "But we have a fighting chance now," Catherine pointed out. "More than I had when you first stopped my hand in that sheriff's office." He smiled at the memory. "You were ready to fight even then. I could see it in your eyes." Catherine turned to face him fully. "Before the ambush, I asked you what happens after Carson City with us." She gathered her courage. "I'd still like to know the answer." Isaiah's eyes met hers, all his usual guardedness gone. "I've been alone for 2 years, focused only on vengeance. I didn't expect to find someone who would make me think beyond that." He took her hand in his. "But you have, Catherine. When I think about what comes after Harrison, I find I can't imagine it without you." Catherine's heart soared at his words. "I feel the same," she admitted. "These past days have been terrifying and dangerous, but also clarifying. I know what I want now more clearly than I ever have." "And what is that?" he asked, his voice low and tender. "I want my ranch," she said simply. "And I want you beside me, helping me build it into everything it can be. Not as my protector, but as my partner." Instead of answering with words, Isaiah leaned forward and kissed her. It was gentle at first, almost hesitant, but quickly deepened into something that expressed everything they had come to feel for each other during their perilous journey. When they finally parted, Isaiah kept her close, his forehead resting against hers. "I can think of no greater honor than being your partner, Catherine Wells, in all things." The following morning, Turner escorted them to the courthouse in Carson City. Judge Wilson, a stern-faced man with keen eyes and a reputation for fairness, listened attentively as Catherine and Isaiah presented their case. Catherine produced the deed to Twin Creek Ranch and explained how Harrison had attempted to force her to sign it over. Isaiah then shared the evidence he had been gathering for 2 years' testimonies from other victims, bank records showing fraudulent practices, and documentation of bribes paid to officials in various towns. When they had finished, Judge Wilson sat in thoughtful silence for several moments before speaking. "These are serious allegations against a man of considerable influence," he said at last. "But the evidence is compelling, particularly when considered collectively rather than as isolated incidents." He turned to Catherine. "Miss Wells, I am issuing an immediate injunction preventing anyone from taking possession of your property or forcing you to transfer ownership. This will remain in effect until a full investigation can be completed." Relief washed over Catherine. "Thank you, Your Honor." The judge wasn't finished. "As for the broader allegations against Mr. Harrison, I am ordering the territorial marshal to begin a formal investigation immediately. Mr. Jones, your evidence will be essential to this process." "I'm at your disposal, Judge," Isaiah replied. "Whatever it takes to bring Harrison to justice." As they left the courthouse, Catherine felt as if a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "We did it," she said, squeezing Isaiah's hand. "My ranch is protected. For now," he cautioned. "The investigation will take time, and Harrison won't give up easily. He'll fight these charges with everything he has." "Then we'll fight back," Catherine said with determination. "Together." They spent the next week in Carson City, working with the territorial marshal to organize the evidence against Harrison. Word was sent to Twin Creek Ranch, and to their relief, they received a response from Mr. Daniels confirming that he was alive and well, though the ranch had suffered considerable damage during the attack. When it was finally time to return to Ely, they traveled with a marshal's escort to ensure their safety. The journey back was far less eventful than their escape had been, though Catherine found herself treasuring the quiet evenings around the campfire with Isaiah just as much. As they crested the final ridge overlooking Twin Creek Ranch, Catherine reined Penny to a stop, taking in the sight of her home. The main house still stood, though the barn and several outbuildings had been reduced to charred ruins. The pastures were empty of cattle, but the land itself remained. The Twin Creeks still converged in a silver ribbon through the green valley, and the mountains still rose majestically beyond. "It can be rebuilt," Isaiah said softly, coming to a stop beside her. "All of it." Catherine nodded, emotion tightening her throat. "Yes, it can, better than before." Mr. Daniels was waiting for them when they rode into the yard, his weathered face breaking into a wide smile at the sight of them. "Miss Kathy, Mr. Jones, thank the Lord you're both safe." Catherine dismounted and embraced the old foreman tightly. "I'm so glad you made it, Mr. Daniels, when we saw the fire." "Takes more than that to get rid of me," he assured her, "though they did their best to burn us out. Ran off all the cattle they could find, too." "We'll get them back," Isaiah promised, dismounting and shaking Daniel's hand. "Or buy new ones. This ranch isn't finished yet." In the days that followed, they began the work of rebuilding. The marshal's escort returned to Carson City, but left them with assurance that Harrison had been arrested and was awaiting trial. His assets had been frozen, including the bank in Ely, which was now under territorial supervision. Word spread quickly through the surrounding area that Twin Creek Ranch was hiring, and gradually, workers began to appear, former hands returning, newcomers looking for honest work, even a few of Harrison's former men seeking redemption. Catherine welcomed them all, determined to rebuild not just buildings and herds, but a community. Isaiah proved himself invaluable, drawing on his ranching experience to help plan the reconstruction and find replacement cattle. He worked alongside the men by day and spent his evenings with Catherine, planning the future of Twin Creek Ranch. One evening, as they sat on the newly rebuilt porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and crimson, Isaiah turned to Catherine with an unusually serious expression. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you," he began, taking her hand in his. Catherine's heart quickened. "Yes. These past weeks, rebuilding the ranch with you, have been the happiest of my life. I know we haven't known each other long, but I feel like I've known you forever." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a simple gold ring. "Catherine Wells, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Of building this life, this ranch, this future together as true partners?" Tears of joy filled Catherine's eyes as she nodded. "Yes, Isaiah. Yes, with all my heart." He slipped the ring onto her finger, his mother's ring, he explained, the one possession he had carried with him through all his travels. It fit perfectly, as if meant for her all along. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony on the ranch, with Mr. Daniels giving away the bride and Judge Wilson himself traveling from Carson City to perform the ceremony. The judge brought news that Harrison's trial was progressing well, with more victims coming forward daily to testify against him. As summer turned to fall and fall to winter, Twin Creek Ranch began to flourish once more. The barn and outbuildings were rebuilt stronger than before. A small herd of cattle grazed the lower pastures, the beginning of the bloodlines Catherine had always dreamed of developing. In the orchard, young apple trees took root, a promise of harvests to come. Isaiah and Catherine worked side by side through it all, true partners in every sense. Their different strengths complemented each other, perfectly her knowledge of the land and cattle, his experience with construction and security, both sharing a vision for what the ranch could become. On a crisp December morning, exactly 1 year after the day Isaiah had stopped Catherine's hand in the sheriff's office, they stood together on the porch of their home, looking out over their flourishing ranch. Catherine leaned against her husband, his arm wrapped securely around her waist. "Do you ever think about how different things might have been?" she asked softly. "If you hadn't walked into that office at that exact moment." Isaiah considered the question. "I've never been one to dwell on might-have-beens," he said finally. "But I do know this: walking into that office was the best decision I ever made." Catherine smiled up at him. "Even better than asking me to marry you." "Well, that was a pretty good decision, too," he admitted with a grin, pulling her closer. Inside the house, they could hear Mr. Daniels entertaining their 3-month-old son, Isaac, named for Isaiah's father. The baby's delighted coos brought smiles to both their faces. "We've built something remarkable here," Catherine said, looking out over their land. "Not just the ranch, but a home, a family." "And we're just getting started," Isaiah replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Twin Creek Ranch is going to be everything you dreamed of, Catherine. I promise you that." As if to seal that promise, the sun broke through the winter clouds, illuminating the twin creeks that gave their home its name. The water sparkled like silver in the sudden light, a reminder of the precious legacy they were building together, a legacy born in a moment of courage when a cowboy stopped a woman's hand from signing away her dreams, and in doing so, found his own.